Today what I'm going to do with you guys is I'm going to explain all the wiring for this Pursuit Series PRO9776e system, which is the expediter or the wholesale version of an APS997e. That is probably one of the most popular of all time alarm remote start combos made by Prestige or Audiovox. All the components that are laid out, I'm going to explain what each one does, how it's wired, what its function is, what you do and do not need, because a lot of the stuff you will need as by necessity, and some things you just won't need it at all. So I'm going to take all the mystery out of what is and what is not required for you to do your own vehicle's installation. I'm going to get started by doing some of the simpler, lesser complicated harnesses, such as this one here. This one's going to take us the longest, so I'm going to save this one for last. Just to give you a lay of the land here, what we have is in the main unit is you have what's called, commonly known as the brain, or the main module system, and the two transmitters that come with it. Also, you're going to have your shock sensor, which is going to be an adjustable little module here with a setting with a green and a red LED. The green is there to indicate pre-warn or lighter impacts, and the red is the instant triggers. And then you have the adjustable setting, so this will adjust them together as one simplified adjustment screw for both. And right here is your 4-pin plug. You're going to have the larger end, which goes right into the system there, into the shock sensor. This end here is going to plug into the shock sensor port on the module, and you have red, which is power, black is your ground, green is your pre-warn, and then you're going to have blue, which is your instant trigger for your shock sensor. So that's that. See, quick, moving quick. Okay, so next one along is this guy here, which is just a pin switch. So basically the way this works is this way. If you're going to use this under your hood and your hood was to press down, this would be installed in such a way where the switch is currently normally closed, and when the hood is down, it makes it normally open. And the hood is closed, it's going to open up this circuit right here. Then when the hood is opened, the ground that this is mounted to will send ground through the circuit to the alarm system, letting it know that the hood is open, keeping the remote start from engaging. So it's a remote start safety feature, essentially, is all this is. It's optional. This system also comes with an optional toggle switch, where if you want to do, you can just mount it under the dashboard and do it that way. Either way is fine, but this one here is automatic, because when you open the hood, it's always going to send the signal, which can be replaced by mercury switches, tilt switches, whatever you have. And then moving along, I've got this big 8-pin guy right here. This one here is called the main ignition harness. So in here we have 8 different wires. Now some vehicles will require all of these connections, some will not require them all, and some of them are programmable to do multiple functions as well. The first one is your red and your red-white. These are 30 amp rated inputs. One will do power for the remote start, the second one will be for the parking lights, door locks, trunk accessory outputs, etc. Two together give you combined power for your alarm system when used together. One is not good enough, and I would not suggest ever putting this one to this one together and twisting them and putting to a circuit that can only handle, say, 15 or 20 amps. They should get the full 30 amps if required, because some cars are really, it's tough to start, and you're going to need that power, trust me, when you need it. Moving along, you got the blue, which is your primary ignition one. This is your primary ignition main output. That's always going to be required. And over here you got your purple. This is an accessory output. Accessory means your heat or your AC. So depending on your climate, if you're in the south like I am, you want this to turn on your air conditioning. You can turn on your air conditioning and not turn on your heat or your radio. You don't have to have the radio on to have a remote start engaged, but in certain vehicles that same circuit might be in common with another one, so it's good practice if it has a wire in the ignition harness to duplicate it exactly as it is in the key harness and do it no differently. So there's your accessory output, there's your ignitions, your 2 constant 12 volt inputs, your yellow, which is going to be your starter output. This wire is always going to rest at ground, and when the key is turned to crank, this is going to get 12 volts and crank over the starter motor. Simple enough. Green, this is your second ignition. So some vehicles have a second ignition. Actually, a lot of vehicles actually have second, sometimes even third ignitions. If that's the case, you need to have this connected. Just as a good side note, between the way that this accessory wire output operates and the way the ignition output performs its job is such as this. When you get into your vehicle, turn your key on, both of these are going to have 12 volts, right? But when you crank the vehicle, this wire will go low to ground, and when the key is retracted back into its normal run position, this one will hold 12 volts. This one holds 12 volts during crank. That's a very important difference between the ignition wire and the accessory wire. Now you got here your pink. This is your ignition 3. Like I was saying, some vehicles have a third ignition. A lot of vehicles, these common vehicles these days, use this. So if you need it, there it is. On some systems, this is actually programmable. You could use it for a negative output. Some you can use it for a second accessory, because some vehicles have that as well. So keep that in mind. Read your manuals. This guy right here, your red black, again, this is a normally open contact, which could be programmed and it could be used as normally closed, what have you, for your vehicle's application. So that is your ignition harness, pretty much explained. These have not changed almost at all over the years. And a lot of times, actually, these are not even used as much as they need to, because with data interfaces, CAN bus modules, and all this other stuff, a lot of the stuff gets handled digitally, as opposed to analog like this one here is. Moving along, we got a 4-pin and second main harness. So this one here has some wires in there which are white with a black stripe, white with a red stripe, and a black wire. So your black is going to be your chassis ground. Ground is going to be connected with something like this at a factory bolt, or you could just tack onto a wire that's already going to a solid ground in your vehicle. That's your ground. White, red, parking light relay input. So what that means is that whatever polarity goes on this wire, say if you have negative parking lights, if you put ground and tie this with the black together, it's going to give you an output on the white. So if you put ground on the white with the red stripe, you're going to get ground on the white output. If you put 12 volts on the white with the red stripe input, you're going to get a positive on the white output. Simple enough. White with the black stripe is your siren output. So when you lock and unlock the doors, use the car locator panic feature, or when the alarm goes into trigger mode, this one here is going to get 12 volts and send signal to the siren. Next, we have a 3-pin plug here, which is your door lock output harness. So there's your plug side that goes into the main unit, and over here you got your 3 wires. So you got a green, a red, and a red with a black stripe. Green is your door unlock, red is your lock wire. The red with the black stripe, this is an interesting one. This one here is your second door unlock output. This has to be added in with an external relay, because in some vehicles, or I should say most vehicles that have factory keyless entry, when you hit lock, red is just going to lock all the doors, and you hit green, it's going to unlock the driver master door. You hit it again, it does all the slave motors in the front passenger, the rear doors, fifth door, hatch, what have you. If that's the case, you would take this and you would integrate that into the wiring, which is illustrated in the manual. That's a little bit more than I want to get involved in, but that's what that's used for. For most applications, most people just want to hit lock, all the doors locked, hit unlock, they all unlock, so just go with the red and the green, twist those up and put them to your lock and unlock wires. And again, refer to your manual. Your manual is going to dictate if your vehicle has multiplex, one wire door locks, negative outputs, positive triggers, 5-wire, rest with open, central locking, vacuum locks, double pulse unlock, whatever your vehicle calls for. Your manual is there, and if you need a cheat sheet for your specific year, make, and model vehicle, you can always email us. We'll be happy to give it to you, or refer to your manufacturer or wherever you purchase your system, because it's good to have that along with your install guide. You put the two together, it makes the job so much easier. So much easier. Okay, then we have the plug here, which is for our antenna. It's a valley switch, and it's an LED all in one little unit. I can just get this plug in here. Goes like that. Now you can see on the front here you have 2 LEDs, which are multicolor LEDs, and you also have a button here which you can use for a lot of functions. One, to put the system into valet mode, to disable the system, put into valet, to program the features of your system, and make some other modifications. Also in here is also your transceiver, so it's receiving and communicating to from your remotes to the antenna to the module and back. So you have in this harness, if you wanted to get real technical, you have your red, which is 5 volts, green, which is RX, which means receive, black is ground, gray is your valet enable. So when you hit this button here, it's going to send a pulse through the gray, and then you have your blue, which is for your LEDs, or LED cathode they call it on the manual. But most cases, no one's going to really use that. I'm sure you'll be no different, because not too many people do. But if you needed to know it, it's good information to have. Now, before I tackle this big sucker here, I'm going to show you this starter disable. On here, you have 4 wires and you have a diode. You're not going to want to mess with the diode That just prevents bleed back on the starter circuit. But you're going to have orange, which is GWR on the manual, called ground when running. Orange goes to orange on this system. So when your doors are locked or your system is armed, it's going to put a ground signal from here, and orange is going to hold this wire, so that way it's going to keep these two pins, the black and the white with the black stripe, the starter wire, interrupted, and keep the starter wire from engaging. It's going to keep that circuit open. When you disarm the system, this will not have ground any longer, so that way this won't affect these pins 87A and 30 from connecting, so that way you can start the vehicle normally. So that's all there is to that. If you follow it color to color and just follow it as the illustration in the guide shows you, it should be pretty straightforward for you. Here's the main 22-pin wiring harness. Now this is going to get a little bit more technical. You have a green-white, which is dome light output. So what that means is, again, it's optional. When you hit unlock on your vehicle, it's going to send a negative signal and apply a ground signal on the green-white for a prolonged length of time, which you can use to connect to a relay, tie that into the coil, and have it connected in conjunction with your dome light wire in your vehicle, so that way if you unlock it, it puts on your parking lights, you get a little audible chirp from your siren, and also illuminates the interior dome light for safety, and it's just nice to come up to a lit vehicle at night. So that's what that wire is for. Dome light output. Next we have the light blue. This is ground while running. This can be used for a lot of things, especially if you just want to have a circuit on while the vehicle is running, if you need it for a second negative ignition, if you need to tie it into a factory disarm wire, something like that. That wire can have a ton of multiple uses. I mean, the sky's the limit on that guy. Black with white, that's your negative horn output. In your steering column where your horn comes out and the wire comes out, you tie that negative output wire into that negative horn output wire like it is in every vehicle, wire to wire, and you can enhance your system with the siren. You can do horn multiplied against each other. It can really make your vehicle stand out from a crowd, and you can tell which one is yours. It makes it much more discernible, audibly anyway. Next to you have your purple, which is your positive door trigger input, which is going to be any vehicle who has door triggers which rest either open or at the ground, and when you open the door, it puts on 12 volts onto the door trigger or dome light circuit. That is where that wire goes to, and that's going to trigger the security system to engage when the door is open. On the other side, you're going to have a negative door trigger wire, which I'm going to get to down the list, but for right now, next one is our brown with black. That's your inhibit, shutdown to brake switch. On your brake switch, you're going to have several wires. One of them is going to rest at ground, and when you depress the brake, it's going to show 12 volts. That's where your brown with the black is going to go to. That's going to be your remote start defeat. So after you remote start your vehicle, you open your door, you get in, you turn your key on. Once you depress the brake, the remote start power is no longer on. It just stays running on the key power, and that's how you make the transition from the remote power to the key power. Next one is your orange with the black stripe. That's a negative brake input. I've never used that in my life, but if you do have that application where your brake lights are negative instead of positive, that's the wire for it. Next one, green with the yellow stripe. That's a glow plug input wire. So that obviously is for a diesel. You'd have to turn on the diesel setting on your unit. With that conjunction, you could tie it into the glow plug wire, so that way it'll test and it'll hold a ground, or it'll hold the signal on that wire, and when it is removed, that means that the vehicle is ready and the glow plugs are ready to be, they're warmed up enough so you can start the vehicle. That's going to send a signal to your alarm system utilizing that green with the yellow stripe for your glow plugs. That only applies to diesel vehicles, of course, not gas. Next one is your brown negative door trigger input. That is basically just the opposite of the purple. So if you have negative door triggers when you open your door and it goes low to ground to turn your dome light, that's your input wire for your alarm system on your doors. So brown is your negative door trigger. Next one, you got a green with an orange. That's a tachometer input, or a tach input. So on your coil in your ignition, or you can use usually an injector wire on most vehicles. That's going to give you the tach rate, so that way the vehicle can tell when the remote start is engaged. It'll give you a regulated AC voltage on that wire to let the system know that the remote start is working effectively. In a lot of cases, you can actually have your vehicle programmed for voltage sensing if it's too hard to do it, if you're using it on a tough vehicle where it's hard to get through the firewall, or if it's a diesel, if you're just, lazy. Basically, I've seen that so many times. You can just go voltage and not even do tach, but it is recommended, and I've always done tach whenever applicable. Next one is your dark green. That's a negative trigger input, and that you would tie into either your hood or your trunk, so that way when the remote start or the alarm system senses a security breach, like the hood being opened, the trunk, that's going to send a negative ground signal for the system to arm and go into full trigger mode. Next one you got here is your channel 3 trunk release output. So basically that's just going to put a ground output on this one here. So when you hold this guy down for 2 seconds, it's going to put a negative signal, so that way you can pop your trunk using that channel. And also you notice that there's other channels on here, so you can use channel 3, 4, 5, a validity channel, and you can actually mix and match. So if you want your trunk on one, if you want to do this for, you know, say a gas fuel door, or this one here for windows, or whatever other options you're doing, you can really get creative right there, and there's really no right or wrong way to do it. It's just a matter of your personal user preference, really. Moving along, you get green black. That's your channel 4 output, which is hitting this for 3 seconds. By default, if you hit this 2 times, that's a remote start. That's called channel 7 on a Prestige. Then you have the blue and the red. That's going to be on the left, number 1 channel output. Then of course you're going to have the other one here for channel 6, which you hold down the second button there. Light black with the light green stripe, that's your pulse after start output. So that way it will send a pulse output after the remote start engages. So you could use that to relock the doors, because some vehicles you have to unlock the doors, remote start, and then after it starts you don't want to leave your doors unlocked. So this wire will actually automatically send a pulse to relock your doors. And then when you walk up to it, you hit unlock, and it's just a quick workaround wire, and it's pretty popular in a lot of different import vehicles. Then you got black yellow pulse during crank output, which you could use again for a bypass module, lots of other things, little interfaces and, you know, little gadgets that you might want to use. It's not the most popular thing in the world, but it is there, and it's nice that they have the feature, because you never know if you ever need it, or switch it to another vehicle that does need it, because you don't need it now. And then again, you got light blue with the black, that's channel 6 output, light blue with the green, channel 5 output. Almost done. Gray with the black stripe is a negative inhibit wire, or shutdown to hood switch. So that is a wire that would go to this guy right here, which would tell the remote start to shut down if it senses a ground signal while the hood is in the open position. Last but not least, we've already covered, but I'll say it again, it's the orange. That's your negative output wire. So this orange here is going to go to this orange here, color to color, and that's going to be your ground when armed system output, and that's going to keep your starter disable open for security purposes while it's armed. And I think we've just about done it all. The only thing that's really missing here that you would find in the retail version, the APS997e, is that this one would have a siren. And if that's the case, you would again just tie the white with the black stripe to the white with the black stripe on the siren, ground the siren, and that's it. I mean, aside from that, this is basically the non-retail version. It's just the one I had, so I figured out, let me go with it. And I get a lot of calls for people wanting to get wiring on these Audiovox systems. I've done one on DEI, I've done it to death, and people love it, and they've been asking forever and ever. And I figured, hey, I got the time. So there you have it. If you do need actually tech support from this company, there is a phone number. It's free for any consumer. So if you need it, jot it down real quick. The phone number is 631-231-7750. They have a lot of resources. They have some nice friendly people that are there to help you, and I've called them many times. And that's pretty much my explanation of how the Audiovox Pursuit series wiring is done.